We'll get started. Folks can join here. We'll start with some introductions. My name is Ben Edelstein. I am co-chair for Marshall Rock. We're the long-term recovery group, and we're very pleased to have the opportunity to host this session with the Taxpayer Advocate Service. Joe Garcia from TAS is going to be presenting about their organization, and he can introduce himself. I will let you know that this meeting will be recorded, and we will post the recording on our website. As I've noted, there has been a tremendous demand for this session, so we will work with TAS to schedule additional sessions as well. And there's also an opportunity to do some one-on-one meetings, and Joe will cover that also. So I'm going to just turn it over to Joe Garcia from Taxpayer Advocate Service and let him take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ben. I'm going to share my screen here as we go ahead and get started. Everyone, oh, I apologize. It doesn't look like I can share, but that's okay as well, because I'm just going to be going over a few things this morning. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining today, and good morning. I want to thank Ben and the Marshall Recovery Outreach Center and all of the navigators for hosting this call and working with the Taxpayer Advocate Service to set this up to what I hope to be a very beneficial information session to all of you. And before we get started, I do want to say that my heart goes out to all who have been affected by the Marshall Fire, and the impact that it's had on your lives has been tremendous. I definitely understand that, and I empathize with that. And on behalf of the Taxpayer Advocate Service, our heart goes out to you, and we hope that you find this session informational. So as Ben mentioned, my name is Joe Garcia. I am the local taxpayer advocate for the state of Colorado. The Taxpayer Advocate Service is an independent organization within the IRS. And so we are not quite the IRS. We are within the IRS, but we are a legally independent organization within the IRS. And I'm going to try and share my screen here, folks, just because that will do us a little bit more justice. Okay, so as I mentioned, Taxpayer Advocate Service is an independent organization within the IRS, and what we do is we help taxpayers resolve their problems with the IRS. We help all taxpayers solve their problems with the IRS, individuals, businesses, nonprofits, and many taxpayers in between that spectrum. The service that we provide everyone is probably one of the few remaining absolutely free services that I have come in contact with. The service that we provide is very free, no catch, no gimmicks, no income requirements, no 10 steps or hurdles to jump through or over. The service that we provide is absolutely free. There are no income limitations, requirements. As long as you are a federal taxpayer, you can receive the services that the Taxpayer Advocate provides. A lot of folks truly do not know about the Taxpayer Advocate Service, and so part of my goal here today, in addition to providing you all with some very good information, is to also bring that awareness to all of you here today that the Taxpayer Advocate Service is here, absolutely free, and we help taxpayers resolve their problems with the IRS. So not only do we help taxpayers resolve their problems with the IRS, but we also look at and review administrative changes to how the IRS does things, whether that's some kind of process or policy or procedure administratively, or if that's legislative changes that the IRS needs to make. The Taxpayer Advocate Service is a tremendous part of those efforts in dealing with administrative changes to the IRS, mitigating problems that the IRS has throughout the year, and also identifying potential legislative changes to mitigate any such problems that are affecting the tax-paying public. What we also do, everyone, is we also protect taxpayer rights. If you're not aware of that, every taxpayer in this country has a set of taxpayer rights, which I'll get into in a later slide. But the Taxpayer Advocate Service absolutely ensures that in dealing with the IRS, that the IRS is adhering to the taxpayer rights. As I mentioned, I'll get to that here in just a second. But when we correspond with the IRS and when we're helping a taxpayer resolve their problem with the IRS, we very much ensure that we lead out in those discussions with the IRS by protecting taxpayer rights. We also help taxpayers where a system within the IRS has failed or does not operate as it was intended. In addition to helping taxpayers resolve their problems on their personal taxes. And so just wanted to share that with all of you. Quite frankly, everyone, the Taxpayer Advocate Service, when it comes to dealing with the IRS, is truly a taxpayer's voice. And when trying to connect with the IRS, trying to deal with the IRS, so on and so forth. So when does a taxpayer come to us for help? Well, in general, everyone, if you're experiencing some kind of financial or economic hardship related to your dealings with the IRS or in relation to your taxes, or maybe there's an immediate threat of adverse action by the IRS, that's the point where you want to contact TAS here in Denver. If you're not able to resolve various issues with the IRS and you tried to go through the normal IRS channels, you tried to call the helplines, you've tried to respond to the notices, you've tried to get in touch with someone responding to a collection action or a lien or levy, or there's so many different tax issues that we assist with, that's kind of your cue to come and contact the Taxpayer Advocate Service here in Denver. If you've tried to contact the IRS and you've sent them information and you're experiencing a delay in them getting back to you, and it's been many months, that's another really good example of when to contact the Taxpayer Advocate Service and let them know, hey, haven't heard from IRS, significant delay, it's creating a hardship for me. Those are the types of very simple examples and general examples that a taxpayer should use as a catalyst to contact the Taxpayer Advocate Service. I will say that the Taxpayer Advocate Service has an office in every state. Every state has a local taxpayer advocate. I am the local taxpayer advocate for Colorado, so I oversee all operations for the state, and all the way from downtown Denver to the four corners of our great state. And I have an office of tremendously talented people. Two of the managers from my office are on the call here today, and we have a tremendous amount of skillfully experienced people, case advocates in the Denver office. Our office is located in downtown Denver at 1999 Broadway, and we work very hard to advocate for taxpayers every single day. I'm going to get a little bit more into this as we go into some of the last slides here, but here's some really good contact information on how you all can contact TAS. And again, I'll be giving some local information here at the end of my presentation. But the quickest way to get in touch with us is through the TAS website, and that walks you through how to obtain TAS services. I'll also be sharing our local number here in the last slide of my presentation, so not to worry. I also have my two managers here on the call who will be putting some of the local information in the TAS website in the chat, so everybody has it. And as Ben mentioned, this is recorded, and so will thus be posted on the website for future reference. So when a taxpayer comes into the Taxpayer Advocate Service, what can you expect? I can assure you, everyone, that the first thing that you can expect is someone who's really, truly willing to connect with what you're going through. We pride ourselves here in TAS and especially in the state of Colorado on putting ourselves in the taxpayer's shoes. And what does it feel like to try and navigate this complex tax system that we all exist in? I can assure you right off the bat, you will get someone who will listen to you. You will get through to someone. You will not spend hours and hours on hold. And you have an advocate, truly an advocate, who is going to be walking with you side by side and trying to resolve your issue with the IRS. So truly, as I mentioned before, the Taxpayer Advocate Service is your voice at the IRS. When you contact TAS for assistance, one of the first things that we'll do is we'll listen to what your issue is. And we're going to put ourselves in your shoes. And after that, if you meet our criteria, and I'll get into that here in just a second, we will assign a case advocate to your case. That case advocate, from start to finish, is truly your personal advocate. They will journey with you side by side from start to resolution of your issue. They will reach out to you, keep you updated, and ultimately everyone will resolve your issue with the IRS to the extent that we can and are able to. The nice thing about TAS, and not just, that's an understatement, quite frankly, but the amazing thing about TAS is that you don't get piecemeal resolution when you come to the Taxpayer Advocate Service. You truly do receive a full service approach. Sometimes when you call into the IRS, you may get a phone representative and they can only go so far in helping you resolve your issue, or they're not able to provide certain things. Excuse me, but when it comes to the Taxpayer Advocate Service, everyone, TAS is able to resolve your issue in totality. We have access to all IRS systems. We communicate directly with the IRS functions wherever your return issue or your tax issue may be. And we advocate for the taxpayer to bring about quick resolution as quickly as we can. So when you ask for assistance from TAS, we do our best to generally get back to you. The 7-day time frame that you're seeing here on the screen no longer exists post-pandemic. I can tell you that, but we will do our best to get to you as quickly as we can. And as I mentioned, that case advocate assigned to your case will call you on the phone. We'll also send you a letter and let you know what's going on. Hey, here's what's happening with your return. Here's what's happening with your refund. Here's why the IRS is doing what they're doing, so on and so forth. They're going to give you estimated timeframes on when your issue will be completed. These days, it's taking a little longer because of all the different issues that the pandemic caused, and the various issues that we're facing, here at the IRS. And so, we will do our best to resolve your issue as timely as we can. But I think the best thing to walk away from this slide, everyone, is that you do have an advocate who's going to walk by you side by side to resolve your issue. And I think that's very reassuring, especially in a very complex tax system. And that's why TAS exists. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we do have a set of criteria that we look at when it comes to accepting a taxpayer's case. Some of the things that we don't accept here in TAS is we don't give tax advice, everyone. So if you're looking for specific advice on your tax situation, here are my facts. What do I do? What position should I take on a return? The Taxpayer Advocate Service does not give tax advice, but we educate and provide education as best as we can. We do our best to guide folks down the right path, but we don't give tax advice. That's one simple example that the type of case that TAS will not accept. We don't make recommendations for specific preparers. Obviously, as an independent organization, we do our best to maintain our independence and our objectivity in what we do. And so those are just some simple examples of the types of cases that TAS does not accept, or the type of advice that we do not give in order to maintain our independence. As I mentioned, a little bit earlier, we talk directly with the IRS to resolve systemic and administrative issues and processes within the IRS, and then we also play a part in proposing legislation in changing the way the IRS does business. This may be a little hard to see on the Zoom call. Let me see if I can just blow it up here a little bit. But one of the things that the Taxpayer Advocate Service prides itself on is implementing and enforcing with the IRS, and in our discussions with the IRS and trying to resolve taxpayer problems, is this this taxpayer bill of rights. Everyone on this phone call as a taxpayer in this country has a set of taxpayer bill of rights. In your dealings with the IRS, everyone, you have the right to be informed. And so the simple example I gave earlier, what does that mean? It means that if you have not heard from the IRS and you've been trying to get in contact with them from a notice they sent you, or a letter they sent you, or a collection action that's being taken place, or perhaps an examination or a refund you haven't received, and you have no idea what's going on, it is your fundamental right as a taxpayer to be informed of those types of things. And so that's a type of case that the Taxpayer Advocate Service will accept. If you have not heard from the IRS in at least 30 days or beyond, we will accept your case for the most part in general. And as I mentioned, in our correspondence with the IRS, when we're trying to resolve your issue, everyone, we will lead out with these taxpayer bill of rights that you see here on your screen. So in this first example, the right to be informed, if a taxpayer comes to Taz and says, hey, Taz, I haven't heard from the IRS in 4 months and on my refund, and I filed, 4 months ago, what's going on? The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to reach out to the IRS and say, hey, IRS, this taxpayer has a right to be informed on where their refund is, what's going on. And we will correspond with the IRS to see what the holdup is. At that point, when we find out what the holdup is, we will get back in touch with the taxpayer and say, here's what we found and here's how we need to proceed. But the key to walk away from is that every taxpayer with the IRS has the right to be informed. Taxpayers have the right to quality service. So if you are not happy with the service that you're getting as a taxpayer in dealing with the IRS on an issue that you're facing, you have the right to quality service. You have the right to pay no more than the correct amount of tax. Another big one here is that a taxpayer has the right to challenge the IRS's position and be heard. A lot of taxpayers might feel a sense of hesitancy in dealing with the IRS, but it is your fundamental right as a taxpayer and mine that the IRS's position can be challenged and you can be heard on that challenge. Taxpayers have the right to appeal an IRS decision in an independent forum. The taxpayers in this country have the right to finality, to privacy, confidentiality, the right to retain representation should you need it, and of course, overarching umbrella, we all as taxpayers have the right to a fair and just tax system. So as you can see, everyone, in what I'm sharing, Taxpayer Advocate Service is absolutely taxpayers' voice at the IRS, and we enforce these taxpayer rights in every correspondence that we utilize, in every correspondence that we extend to the IRS in resolving taxpayer problems. We also work very closely with the state's low-income taxpayer clinics. We have 3 in Colorado. And if you qualify and your income qualifies and is under a certain threshold, you can get representation from our low-income taxpayer clinics here in the state of Colorado. We also do have 1 low-income taxpayer clinic that does tax preparation all year round. And my 2 managers can provide the names of those low-income taxpayer clinics in the chat here today. Of course, there's Colorado Legal Services. There's also the University of Denver's low-income taxpayer clinic, as well as the Denver Asset Building Coalition, who is the only low-income taxpayer clinic in the state that does provide free tax preparation. Everyone, we also work very closely with the congressional offices here in the state and our 2 Senate offices here in the state of Colorado. In fact, where the Marshall Fire where the Marshall Fire occurred, I believe the district belongs to Congressman Joe Neguse. I want to thank his congressional aide, Kim Red, for being on this call here today and for advocating for constituents in bringing about tax education. Hi, Kim. Thank you, Kim, so much for all that you do. And of course, Congressman Neguse for all of his efforts and assistance that he provides, not just in the community, but with the Taxpayer Advocate Service as well. And so we work with all of our congressional offices here in the state, everyone. And so as you can see, we really do our best to embrace our taxpayers here in the state to help them resolve their problems. Everyone, if you want to know more information about TAS and what we do, this is kind of a shortened version of what we do. Please visit our website, taxpayeradvocateservice.irs, or excuse me, taxpayeradvocate.irs.gov. And there's a tremendous amount of information, including all of my contact information, which I will share here in the next slide as well, and that my managers will be putting in the chat so that way you all have it as well. So as I mentioned, everyone, the Taxpayer Advocate Service here in Denver is located at 1999 Broadway in downtown Denver. Our local phone line is here on your screen should you need assistance. Should you need additional assistance, actually want to open a case with TAS, our fax number here is on the screen as well. And all of my contact information, which is very public, so I don't mind sharing it, is on the screen as well. You can feel free to send me an email. That's probably the quickest way to get in touch with me. But should you need to pick up the phone and give me a call, you may do so. I will do my best to get in contact with you as soon as I can, that I can assure you. Folks, in order to bring about efficient assistance from TAS when requesting assistance is by completing a form 911. I did not come up with that form number, but that is how you request formal TAS assistance. I submitted, I have the link here on the website, or excuse me, on the materials here, and we'll do our best to put that link in the chat. It's also on the Taxpayer Advocate Service website, everyone, and you can access that, download it. It's a fillable form. And then you take that form 911 and you fax it over to the local fax number here that you see on your screen. So that is the best way to contact the Taxpayer Advocate Service. So I'm going to pause there and stop sharing, and I'm going to transition everyone to some general information about what you all have experienced and what you all may be having questions about in terms of the tax implications of this disaster that occurred. Now, I do want to give some preface, everyone. What's to follow is not tax advice. Taxpayer Advocate Service does not give tax advice, nor can we. We are, as I mentioned, we are that legally independent organization within the IRS. However, we do want to try to bring about awareness and what information is available to you as taxpayers, so that way you can be informed. And so I'm going to be walking through several areas of the IRS websites and publications that you should be aware of as victims of this disaster. And then we will have a little bit of time here towards the end to ask some questions. And so I just want to preface what's about to follow with that. And so having said that, let me share my screen here, everyone. Okay, everybody should be able to see my screen at this time. What you're looking at here, everyone, is the Taxpayer Advocate's website. A tremendous amount of information is on this website, all geared towards helping taxpayers navigate their tax situation. As I mentioned, should you need assistance from TAS, you can navigate to our website, simply click on Get Help, and just kind of it'll walk you through how to obtain TAS assistance. But since we've kind of talked about that a little bit, I'm going to kind of cut through that and move on to the next item that I wanted to share with you all. So everyone, the Marshall Fire was in fact deemed a federal disaster. We all are, I believe, are aware of that. If not, please know that. Back in 2021, when the fire happened, the federal government did deem it a federal disaster. The only piece of legislation that came out from that that federal disaster was the extension of tax filing due dates, so on and so forth, which of course have since expired, I believe around the time frame of May of 2022. And so I'm not aware of any other piece of legislation that was put out for the Marshall Fire. I've checked with my sources here internally and such, and with the IRS sources that I have. And to my knowledge, there is not an additional piece of legislation beyond what was already passed back in early 2022, late 2021. But where does a taxpayer go, to find out the impact of this disaster on my taxes? Where do I go? Well, you can navigate to the link that I'm showing here on my screen, which talks about the various types of tax relief in disaster situations. All of this information is very free. It's on the irs.gov website, and there is a tremendous amount of information, everyone. And so what we hope to accomplish here in this first call, in this first meeting here, is to bring about awareness, allow taxpayers to digest what we're sharing here today, to do some research and due diligence, of course, which I'm sure you already all have been doing, but to hopefully try and give you a little bit more guidance in terms of tax implications to your specific situation. So on the tax relief in disaster situation page, you're going to be able to navigate through the various disasters that were identified by the federal government. And then, of course, when you navigate this web page, you're going to see in 2022, the IRS announced tax relief for Colorado wildfires and straight line winds, of course, i.e. the Marshall Fire. If you click on that website, there's a tremendous amount of information related to the tax relief that was granted. Again, for the most part, and in general, of course, it was the extension of filing date and that type of thing. Since that legislation has, of course, passed and ceased. But if you want more information as to what was available at that time and want to read more on that, you can on this website. The next site on irs.gov, that I wanted to show all of you here today is that there is an FAQ page for disaster victims on the IRS website. And everyone, there is a tremendous amount of information on this website. As you can see, I'm just generally scrolling through the site itself, and you can see that there are very specific questions across various topics and much more information than we could ever go through here in today's session, especially because I want to leave enough time for questions and such. But you will have access to this from the recording, and we will do our best to post the links in the chat. But the various FAQ topics that you're going to find on this website, everyone, is what to do if you've been affected by a disaster and you have questions about records. What about change of address? What about amended returns because I've been affected by a disaster? What about copies of tax returns? What about filing extensions or penalty and interest, taxable state recovery payments? I could go on and on, quite frankly. A lot of questions we received ahead of time about property and casualty losses. All of that type of information you can find here in terms of frequently asked questions that the IRS has posted. So I do hope that you all find that very helpful. Perhaps you'll be able to find an FAQ that's been responded to by the IRS. I know we had a lot of questions about casualty loss and valuations. There are some various questions on that topic answered here. And so I wanted to bring about an awareness for all of you on that, because there's a tremendous amount of information on the IRS website. The next site on the irs.gov website that I wanted to share with all of you is the Disaster Assistance and Emergency Relief page for individuals and businesses. On this site, everyone, you're going to be able to get an overview of any kind of special tax law provisions that were implemented. You're going to be able to access the latest tax relief guidance on disaster situations. You're going to be able to access the various tax topics and publications as it relates to casualty, disaster, and theft losses, reconstructing your records, which I'll get to here in just a second. There's also a handful of disaster planning videos here, as well as a resource, if you're a tax professional on this call, for Disaster Relief Resource Center for tax professionals. Of course, there's a link to the Taxpayer Advocate Service. If you have any specific issues or problems in dealing with the IRS where you've just exhausted any type of resolution, you can contact us, as I mentioned before, and just a few other helpful sites and publications that I will get into here in just a second, but a tremendous amount of information on this site. A lot of the questions were asked for this particular meeting in relation to records. Unfortunately, there are very many of you who lost records in this disaster, and my heart goes out to you. But if you have any questions or you need any more information about reconstructing records after a natural disaster, this is the site that you want to navigate to. It talks about figuring out the losses, casualty and disaster tax losses, talks about amended returns, talks about determining any kind of decrease in fair market value, so on and so forth. And so just a tremendous amount of information that this page can provide to you. If you're trying to figure out what do I do in terms of reconstructing my tax records, and what do I need to do if I'm trying to reconstruct my business records as a result of this disaster. So I truly do hope, everyone, that you find that helpful and that you're able to navigate some very helpful information from this site. We also received a tremendous amount of questions on who do I contact as a preparer who has disaster relief experience. Unfortunately, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Taxpayer Advocate Service does not provide guidance on here's who you should select. We don't endorse any particular preparer at all, of course, because that would compromise our independence. But on the irs.gov website, there is a link in the materials that I have here, and we'll do our best to put it in the chat, on if you need someone to prepare your tax return. Where do you start? What do you do? What kind of preparer do I need? What kind of credentials and qualifications should I look at? How would I choose a tax preparer wisely? How do I check tax preparer credentials? And unfortunately, we do live in a society where there is potential fraud in regards to these types of disasters. And so if you have a complaint about a tax preparer, you can even submit that and find more information here on the irs.gov website. You can make a complaint if needed. And of course, it will be looked into. And so even though everyone, as I mentioned, TAS doesn't endorse or say this is the tax preparer you need to go see to maintain our independence, we absolutely do our best to point you in the right directions, provide you with as much education and awareness as we possibly can to help you all out. So having said that, I did want to just quickly share one other piece of information, and that is actually two more pieces of information, and then we'll open it up for questions, because I want to make sure and leave enough time for that. And I'm going to share my screen here. But everyone, publication 547 is going to be your go-to publication when it comes to casualties, disasters, and theft losses. As you can see from the table of contents here on the right-hand side, you're going to want to just read through this in general, but you're going to want to navigate specifically to the disaster area losses here on the screen. And when I click on the disaster area losses, you can see that there's a tremendous amount of information here in terms of disaster loss, when it occurred, how to deduct your loss in a preceding year. And as I just kind of bring about awareness for purposes of this first call here today, you can see that there's just a tremendous amount of information here that is going to take a little bit of due diligence in order to kind of read through, much more than what could ever be gone through on this call here today. But personal use of residential real property, near total loss of personal residence. If there was any damage to a detached structure, which very well could be the case in the area that we're talking about here today, so on and so forth, records, reporting requirements, copies of tax return, just a tremendous amount of information in this publication. But I did want to bring about awareness for all of you in case you have questions. Hey, where do I go to look for information on casualties, disasters, and thefts? And as you can see, there's a tremendous amount of information in here. Just requires a little bit of due diligence and such, but there is a specific area for disaster area losses. We did receive quite a few questions about calculating losses, a lot of questions about basis, and I just wanted to bring to your attention another publication, and you're going to be seeing that here shortly on your screen, and that is publication 551. Publication 551, everyone, is the publication that walks a taxpayer through how to determine the basis of an asset. Many taxpayers on this call, unfortunately, lost homes, structures, assets, and now you're wondering, how do I calculate the basis associated with that asset? Well, you're going to want to start out by looking at publication 551 to help you determine what that may be. And so I just wanted to bring about awareness on these two publications because we did receive quite a few questions on basis and how to calculate loss. And so having said that, everyone, that's the portion of the presentation that I wanted to go through here today. I do want to say, everyone, Taxpayer Advocate Service is here to serve all of the need related to this disaster, and we do so very gladly and willingly. And we're doing it in cooperation with the Recovery Outreach Center, with Ben and the navigators here, with your local your district congressional office, and really just here to serve. Much more information and that's available than we could have ever gone through in a 1-hour session, everyone. And so just please know that, this is not the end of our assistance. We do hope to, and I'll let Ben speak to this more so than myself, but Taz is here for future events if needed. And of course, are here to help all of you if you have a specific issue with the IRS. So having said that, that's my portion of the presentation. Ben, I'll turn it back over to you. And I'm not sure if there are any questions that we want to take, but I'll turn it back over to you to lead that part, my friend.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. There were a number of questions in the chat. I'm happy to review those and see what you're able to answer and what guidance you can provide. And I'll kind of go in order. I've taken them down from the chat. So there are a number of questions related to the loss of rental income and how to report that loss and provide IRS with evidence of the lost amount.
Publication numbers.
Oh, yes.
And also going to the.
Yeah, please, we'll ask folks to stay on mute for the time being.
Yeah, so everyone, when it comes to any kind of loss, first and foremost, we're going to point you to publication 547. Again, to maintain Taz's independence as an advocate for taxpayers in dealing with the IRS, the types of losses and can I claim this are the types of questions that unfortunately we cannot answer because it falls along the border of tax advice. My recommendation would be, of course, is to navigate to all of the resources that we pointed here today in terms of publications, the disaster FAQ page. A lot of questions and answers on those pages related to losses. And they also talk about subsequent year losses, which would be of course the case that because of the fire, any type of rental loss associated with that in a subsequent year. So I apologize that we can't give a little bit more response to that specifically, but we can provide that education and awareness on those types of situations on what we went over here today. If you do have a specific situation, for example, you filed your 21 tax return, you took a loss, IRS is denying that loss, you've tried to provide them with information, you're not hearing back, you've received a collection notice or something along those lines. Those are the types of situations where you can contact TAS directly and we can advocate on your behalf to see what's going on. But in terms of specific tax advice on that particular topic, unfortunately, I would guide you to the publications and the resources here today.
So another question, I think this is a general question, whether you provide state or federal level support, and I believe it's just federal level, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Ben. Of course, IRS is at a federal level, as is TAS, but we don't, unfortunately, provide any state level support.
Okay, thanks for that. Sorry, I'm just kind of taking a look at the question. Another one related to rental property purchased through a 1031 exchange, and how to handle that through tax filing.
I'm so sorry, Ben, I couldn't hear that question.
Yeah, so the question is, we had a rental property that was purchased through a 1031 exchange. I'm not familiar with that, but I'm wondering if you can say anything about that would need to be handled in filing a return or guidance on where to go to get that information.
Yeah, so along the lines of the last topic, we'll definitely have you navigate to the links and resources that we provided here on this call, publication 547. That is beyond the scope of what TAS can assist with in terms of providing tax advice. Very, very familiar with 1031 exchanges here in TAS as it relates to a taxpayer's tax situation. Again, a good example of TAS assistance would be, hey, there was a 1031 exchange on my tax return. IRS might be challenging it. They're not getting back to me. I've sent them information. There's been a tremendous amount of delay. There's been some kind of adverse action that's creating hardship for me because of it. That's the catalyst for when you, in that situation, will want to contact our office and we can assist you.
Okay. There are a couple of questions here regarding Form 4684 for casualty loss, and whether or not to file that form. I realize that this may stray again into the areas of more specific advice.
Sure.
But is there any guidance that you can direct people to regarding 4684 so that they can make a decision on whether or not to use that?
Yeah, so the Form 4684 is a form that's used to report these types of situations, everyone. And of course, if you file your tax return, you're likely going to have that in general attached to your return. There is a tremendous amount of information on Form 4684, including the instructions and tax topics on irs.gov. That's where I would have you navigate first. And then again, should that turn into a TAS situation, i.e. in a very simple example, hey, I filed Form 4684 to my return in 2021, or maybe subsequently, now that we're in 2022 filing season, and IRS is challenging my position, received correspondence, haven't heard back, called the number on the notice letter. can't get in touch with anyone at the IRS to figure out what's going on with my account or anything related to the correspondence I received. Hey, the letter that I got seems fraudulent. Can you help me look at my account to see if this is truly a notice from the IRS? You know, all those different types of examples are the types of help that we can provide here in TAS. And again, I would navigate to all of the very free information and very helpful information on irs.gov regarding Form 4684. You know,
Um, so,
I'm sorry, Ben, just real quick, you know, another thing that I wanted to mention is that, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Kim Red, who is an amazing congressional aide here with Congressman Joe Negus's office, is also, she's also been helping spearhead information on behalf of constituents in that district. And so you can also reach out to Congressman Joe Negus's office and Kim Red, and they can also provide you with non-tax assistance as well as possibly some assistance, because they work very closely with the Taxpayer Advocate Service on any tax implications. And you can also submit an inquiry, everyone, through Congressman Joe Negus's office and Kim Red in regards to any specific tax situations, and they can provide you assistance as well. Because as I mentioned, any inquiry that you submit through the Congressman's office is funneled through essentially to the Taxpayer Advocate Service. So Kim Red and Congressman Joe Negus are a very helpful resource during this time as well.
Sorry, I'm just going through some of the questions here. You know, I think obviously people's concern are, you know, they do need help with tax preparation, and I realize that you can't specifically recommend, but in terms of providing guidance to help target, can you talk a little bit about the services that are available for tax preparation, understanding that there are limitations on who those services are available to, but let's at least start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, again, we have various low-income taxpayer clinics in the state that provide free tax prep should anybody qualify from an income perspective. Of course, there are voluntary income tax assistance sites popping up all over the city as well for current year filing should you qualify for those services. Outside of that's pretty much the free services that are offered. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, we don't endorse any particular tax preparers or anything like that. But those are the free sources that are available to people should they qualify. I did see some very general questions that I can answer here. How do you know if you have a loss or a gain? Well, typically, in general, emphasis added, if the value of a particular asset is greater than the basis of that asset, in general, you will have gain. If it's the reverse, i.e. the value of that asset is less than the basis of that asset, in general, you have loss. So those are the types of very general things that I can share and answer here on this call. I see questions in here relating to calculation of loss. All of that is addressed in the publication 547 and also the disaster relief sites that were provided in today's call. In general, safe harbor methods for taxpayers are exactly that, safe harbor methods and available for use to taxpayers. I can share that in general. Again, not tax advice, but in general, safe harbor method with the IRS is why they are created and exist, as they are truly that safe harbors for taxpayers. Do we have the right to a speedy tax system? You have the right to quality service. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but you do have the right to quality service. And so if you feel with the tax situation on your taxes, you're not getting back from the IRS, you have the right to quality service. As I mentioned, the information regarding Form 4684 is on the IRS website, as with the instructions and lots of FAQs and tax topics relating to the form. You may very well be able to find your answer there. Okay.
Yeah, and I will say that, from a Marshall Rock perspective, we'll do what we can to try to locate some CPA services. I know that there have been notes posted about United policyholders and having additional sessions for tax preparation, and notes regarding CPAs that are familiar with disaster response and tax filing. It's not always easy, but that's something that we can do what we can from our side to help locate some of those resources. Again, it's always a little bit of a challenge to recommend professional services that you're paying for, and vetting those resources. We need to be a little bit careful about that, but we understand the need to try to identify some of those resources.
Yeah, and allow me to just say, I my heart does go out to all of you in terms of these specific tax situations, and it's just unfortunately something that TAS doesn't do, of course, because of their independence. But there's a tremendous amount of ways that we can assist. Some of the questions, if with a specific IRS situation, some of the questions and comments in here are relating to, where do I go for general education and such. All of that is what was presented here today. I will say it is a little overwhelming to have so many different spots, with the information and of course with the disaster and the implications of that. It is daunting for all of you. And so if there's a specific tax situation that we can help out with, please contact our office and let us know.
There's some questions about safe harbor and what that actually means. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so in general, a safe harbor is something that the IRS will put out related to a specific tax topic where there are various administrative reliefs in that. So whether it's a safe harbor relating to capitalizing expenses to a home or rental property or business, to any safe harbor calculation methods that are out there. So it's just an administrative grace that the IRS puts out there on certain tax topics, and taxpayers adopting that safe harbor usually have some administrative grace on that particular topic.
Thank you. And yeah, to the questions regarding the material, we will post both the slides and the recording of the session on the Marshall Rock website. We can also refer, and I think Daryl McCool from Marshall Rock has started posting the links to the various publications for your reference.
Ben, I do just see a couple of questions relating to the year of loss. In general, the publication 547 says that the loss is to be taken in the year it occurred. But then also in the publication, there are references to subsequent year losses as well as on the irs.gov website in some of the links that we included. So please take a moment to just briefly search through there because those types of things are referenced.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, this occurred at the very end of 2021, at the very end of 2021. And, obviously people haven't really, they would have been working with our insurance companies within 2022. So that does cross the year boundaries. As well, the disaster wasn't even declared until 2022. Is there any training for CPAs that TAS provides or can direct those professionals to so that they are more familiar with disaster case tax preparation?
So on one of the links that I shared a little bit earlier, I'm not aware of any specific disaster relief training for professionals. But on the link on the irs.gov website, there was a disaster relief link for tax professionals, and there may be additional information there. I'm not aware of any off the top of my head. I do see.
Yeah,
some-
so there's,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I just see some questions about IRS timelines. Everyone, in terms of the impact of filing and that kind of thing. Recommendation would always be these days to file electronically because of the IRS backlog. Um, that would, if you decide to electronically file, which is probably the fastest route to getting your return processed, you may want to absolutely consider that and consider paper filing as a last resort because unfortunately there are still millions and millions of returns that have not been processed by the IRS. So I hope that answers the timeline question.
Well, I think some of the timeline here is related to, when you claim losses, when you declare losses, given, when the event occurred.
I do see some questions regarding amended returns for 2021. In general, yes, that time frame is still open for you to file an amended return should you need to. All that information specifically related to amended returns is on, is on the links that I provided.
So I don't know if, I appreciate some of the frustration here in terms of, specific tax preparation and guidelines. Unfortunately, folks will need to read some of those publications regardless. We can see what there is available for CPAs in terms of disaster tax preparation. And we'll do what we can to try to provide some resources in that area.
And I empathize with the frustration as well, everyone. I wish there was more specific information that could be provided, but we will do our best to serve the community and tackle any specific tax situation or problem that you're having with the IRS. And if you're just not sure, please contact our office, send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to see if TAS can assist. I do want to thank everyone for the time here today, and of course, the Marshall ROC and all of the navigators, as well as the congressional representation here today.
Thanks, Joe. And as I said, we will schedule some additional sessions. Can you take just a minute more maybe to talk about the one-on-one sessions that you have available?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Taxpayer Advocacy Service provides a tremendous amount of outreach and education, just like today. And we also do outreach in the community, in person or virtually. One of the outreach arms that we utilize are what is called, Problem Solving Day. And on that problem solving day, that's where myself and very skilled and experienced members of my team here in the Denver office meet with a community or an organization, and we listen to what your specific tax questions are related to a current IRS problem. Where's my refund? Got this notice, have no idea what to do. Responded to this letter and never heard back. Tried calling in and waited on the line for several hours and never got through, and then it hung up on me, and I need to know what's going on with my account. Those are the types of services that Taxpayer Advocate Service can set up with either Marshall ROC, and we can navigate that, and that's where you'll be able to meet one-on-one with TAS, and we can do our best to take a look at any current IRS problem that you have right there on the spot. As I mentioned, we have access to all IRS systems, and if we cannot assist you and your tax situation meets our criteria for assistance, we can open up a TAS case for you right there on the spot.
Excellent, thank you. So we did make available through the through the site, there's a form. If you have specific questions, we're collecting those and working to get some answers, and we'll post those up to the Marshall ROC website. And yeah, we'll continue to work on trying to provide, more specific answers and connect you with additional resources to help you get through this.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us today. And as I said, Taxpayer Advocate Service is here to serve as best as we can. And we're here to walk with you as closely as we can.
I'll post the Marshall Rock website in the chat, but it's pretty simple. It's Marshall Rock, MARSHALLROC.org. Sorry, I think that one directly. I don't know why I sent it to you. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We appreciate it. We'll continue working to try to get you, more information and more support. Thanks very much.